네, 안녕하세요. 오늘 비도 오는데 찾아주신 관객 여러분 감사합니다. 오늘은 더블럭키 프로덕션의 헝클어진 데이터들의 정원이라는 지금 현재 작업 중인, 지금 발전 중인 어떤 신작을 소개하고 그 작품에 대해서 잠시 후에 관객분들하고 조금 더 깊이 있게 이야기해 볼 수 있는 그런 자리를 갖도록 할 텐데요. 먼저 작가분들이 직접 자기의 프로젝트가 지금 어떤 단계에 있는지 또 어떤 내용으로 전개되고 있는지를 소개하는 30분 정도의 영상을 먼저 관람을 하시고 이후에 작가분들을 직접 연결해서 같이 대화를 나눠보는 그런 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그럼 즐거운 관람 부탁드립니다.
All right. Whatever you want. Yeah, very good. Good.
Hello, Seul. Sorry, Maya.
Yeah, okay, good. We start again.
Hello, Seul. This is Berlin Calling. We are Double-Lucky Productions. This is Chris, this is Hannes, and my name is Christiane. And in the next 30 minutes or so, we would like to present to you our latest piece of work called A Scroll Through the Garden of Tangled Data. Or rather, we want to let you in on our work in progress, as actually it has not come out yet. Double-Lucky Productions is a performance company. A Scroll Through the Garden of Tangled Data is not a performance, it's a scrolling website, a parallax website. It's actually our first web-only project, and it came about, you might guess that, because we had to deal with corona restrictions. Originally, we had wanted to make a performative installation that is a video and sound installation with us actually interacting live as performers in the space. We were thinking of a durational performance, 5 hours long, with 12 monitors and people coming and going. But then when it was decided that the theaters in Berlin stay closed until April, we changed plans, basically. Now, before we present this piece of work, The Garden of Tangled Data, I would like to give you a very brief introduction to Double-Lucky Productions. Chris is a video artist, Hannes is a sound artist, a composer and a musician, and I'm a text person. And we have been making theater pieces together for about 15 years already, I would say. Actually always in cooperation with other artists. And since 7 years or so, we've been also working with coders and hackers. And from the very start, we were interested in technology and specifically in digital technologies, both to experiment with them on stage and also to examine their effect on people and society at large. So the digital for us has always been a very important topic. We've worked on digitality and privacy, digitality and identity, or digitality and the body. In general, our pieces deal with what we call digital architectures. Those are the invisible infrastructures that keep our modern world running. And we try to make these invisible infrastructures visible. In the theater space, which is a physical space, and physicality of the space allows us to create experiences, so you can actually experience what you usually think is the untouchable, the digital. For this, we always interact with the audience, or maybe it's better to say we interact with what we call like the data body of the audience.
Digital shadow.
I want to give you two very brief examples. One is in 2015, we made a piece about the loss of privacy, and paradoxically in it we invited the audience to create digital profiles of other audience members. And they did that and they had a lot of fun, right? Saying like, does this person cheat on their partner, and questions like that. At the same time though, we were monitoring the data traffic of their phones, and we got metadata, so we knew what apps they had on their phones, what newspapers they were reading, stuff like that. And we folded this information back into the piece. So you see, it was like a mixture of fun and facts and interaction, which created actually a very creepy atmosphere. Another very brief example, in 2017, we made a piece about the body in the digital age, in which we handed out small devices to the audience that monitored their pulse during the show. And while we were talking about self-optimization, which is kind of the main theme of the body in the digital age, we made it the goal of the evening to bring everybody's heartbeat in sync. So I know that was very brief, but we hope it gave you a flavor of our work in general. And now we would like to come to the Garden of Tangled Data and start it with a small introduction video to the piece. Wir sind Datenwesen. Unablässig produzieren wir Daten. Aber wir haben die Verbindung verloren zu unseren eigenen Daten. Wir schicken sie weg. Klick, klick, klick. Fort. Sie landen auf Serverfarmen. Kalt ist es dort. Sehr kalt. Nichts wächst auf einer Serverfarm. Anders hier, im Garden of Tangled Data. Hier wird nichts ausgebeutet. Hier wird sich um alles gekümmert. Um dich, um deine Daten, um Pflanzen, um Raspberry Pis. Hab keine Furcht. Was hier wächst, wird nie auf die andere Seite der Firewall gelangen. Wenn du gehst, werden deine Daten längst Kompass sein, Humus für das kommende Ökosystem. Spende einen Datensatz aus deiner Tasche, egal was, du entscheidest. Hol dein Telefon heraus und pflücke etwas, was du wachsen sehen möchtest oder vergehen. Hab keine Furcht. Im Garden of Tangled Data wird nichts ausgelesen. Hier wird ausgesät. Profit interessiert uns nicht. Uns interessiert Schönheit. Schönheit und Werden. Metamorphosen. Komm in den Garten. Ohne dich geht es nicht. Du bist die Gärtnerin.
So the piece we want to talk to you tonight about is called The Garden of Tangled Data. And the Garden of Tangled Data is actually a larger project. It's probably going to have many forms before it's all done. But the main idea is that we know that everybody is carrying around with them a huge archive of information. I mean, your phone has all the pictures you put in it. It has emails in it. It also has maybe spam emails in it. It has the information that the accelerometer collects as you walk. And all this stuff is in there. And we all know how attached we are to our phones. It's almost like our phones are part of us, and that the data in our phones is part of the phones, and the phones is part of us. So the data is part of us. And that's something that we've been working with in our last piece, is that how do we relate to the data we create? How do we become aware of all the traces we leave behind? And the big question for us is also, these traces that get left behind, are they part of us? Do they want something? Does the data want something? Now, the first version that we tried to do of the Garden of Tangled Data was thought of as an installation with many monitors all around, and the audience was supposed to come in and donate some data to us. Just give us something, anything. It wasn't important what. It was important to us that we didn't want to steal the data from their phones. We wanted it to be a donation, as if data was like a present that you could give to somebody. And we imagined a space where everybody was giving somebody some data. And unfortunately, that piece, though we had started working on it already, couldn't happen because of Corona. We did make a small test version of it as an installation in Munich. And now, in the next weeks, we will finally show a more complete version of it, not as an installation, but as a website. And in this website, we're really thinking about this idea. What is that? What's going on with that data that's in there? And what does it want?
Everything breathes. Data too. Data breathes. Breathing is just a way an organism mixes with the world.
Schau auf die Blume, versunken in einem langen, tiefen Drogentraum. Schau auf den Code, versunken in einem langen, tiefen Drogentraum.
Data breathes. Only it breathes differently. Breathing is how we take the outside in, but the inside back out there. An organism can be defined by the way it breathes. And you don't need lungs to breathe. A plant doesn't need lungs, but a plant breathes. Data doesn't need lungs, but data breathes. Think of your phone. What's in there? It's a little data garden. Think about it.
Okay, so our first version of the Garden of Tangled Data was an installation close to Munich. And if we talk about the art form of installation in terms of a sound, on the sound level, from a hearing perspective, interesting if you think of the relationship the space had and the sound has, because there's a strong interaction between sound and space. So if you don't use the space just as a container, let's say, and you just place speakers in there, and you have direct sound, and you just like in a, let's say, like in a front of house situation. Mm-hmm. In an installation, it's a different situation because you want to create this environment, you know. Mm-hmm. So you can use the space itself in connection with sound as an instrument. I think if you deal with installation, it's quite important that you use the space not only as a container, let's say, where you put in sounds, but to really think of this interrelation between what is the space doing to the sound, how is the sound shaped by the space, and if you work with that, there's a lot of potential in there, and that's what we also did when we set up our installation in Munich.
And the way we describe the space, Chris just said, you know, people donate data and that everybody works with everybody's data. We were thinking of this space as a community garden. That was the metaphor we worked with. This is a garden, it's a community garden. All the data that's there is everybody's data, and your piece of information you give, the photo or the text, is a seed, and you plant it. We had a database, you plant it in the database, and then you would see on the different monitors how this piece of data is changing, evolving, and you see it grow. I would like to go a little bit deeper into this analogy of data and plants. Because in the Garden of Tangled Data, we suggest that there is a very deep connection between the two, between data and plants. And we're talking about data in the metaphor of plants because we think that using a new language also allows you to have new perspectives on something. In this case, it's the data world. And the point we want to bring across is what we mentioned in the beginning. Don't just think of data as something untouchable, far away on cold server farms, but imagine them right here with us in a community garden. And don't forget that you are the gardener, meaning, you make data grow and also you set the fence. The website we made is structured in 7 chapters according to natural cycles. That is sowing, sprouting, branching, blooming, crossing, as in crossbreeding, withering, and rotting, decaying. We call the picture that the visitor uploads to the website in the beginning the seed. It's the seed that she or he is planting in our garden. And then we invite them, while they're scrolling through the page, to watch it growing, to watch its metamorphosis. And what this looks like on the webpage and what it actually means technically, Chris will explain in a minute. But before, I want to open your mind a little bit to this analogy we're playing with. One is, for instance, that both plants and data reproduce themselves. They don't need the other gender for that, other sex for that. They're both out to expand, to cover new ground. Both data and plants communicate through electrical signals. They both work with a kind of honey trap, an addictive surface. The plant grows a beautiful flower to attract bees, and data infrastructures have shiny interfaces that make you want to touch them and interact with them. In both cases, for data and plants, the biggest part of the organism is in the dark. The roots of plants are underground, just as the back end of the digital framework, is hidden from sight. They both lack heart and brain, and still they're alive, they're intelligent, they're extremely resilient, as both operate in networks. That is probably the first thing that comes to mind with data and plants. They operate in networks. And also, both data and plants are defined by virtual reality, in a sense that their development, their shape, and their whole outcome is not defined from the very start.
Wir wollen mit dieser Website nichts als an einige allen Coderinnen geläufigen Tatsachen erinnern. Wir haben keine neue Entdeckung gemacht. Unser bescheidener Beitrag beschränkt sich auf einige elementare Beobachtungen. Natürlich können wir an dieser Stelle nicht alle Beweise der Lebhaftigkeit von Daten aufbringen. Die sind ja so zahlreich wie die Beweise für die Intelligenz von Pflanzen. Und sie wachsen ebenso exponentiell. Namentlich in der Welt der Blüten und Interfaces. Also dieser Website hier zum Beispiel. Nirgendwo manifestiert sich das Trachten datafizierten Lebens nach Licht und Geist so offensichtlich wie hier. Aber wir wollen hier nicht von datafiziertem Leben sprechen. Uns interessieren lebhafte Daten. Das Letzte, was wir hier versuchen im Garden of Tangled Data, ist die Informationalisierung von Vegetation voranzutreiben. Pflanzen vermessen, analysieren, quantifizieren. Noch einen Sensor an einen Baum zu nageln. Unsere Gärtnerinnen pflegen die Vegetalisierung von Informationen. Der Samen, den Sie soeben im Garden of Tangled Data gepflanzt haben, er kann in 4 Minuten hier auf dieser Website aufgehen oder 4 Jahre lang auf einer Serverfarm überwintern, bevor er keimt. Der Keimling, der aufgeht, kann 4 oder 14 Blätter austreiben. Er kann 3 oder 30 Blüten tragen. Er kann 300 oder 3000 Pixel groß werden. Er kann 2D, 3D, MP4, HTML oder Bitcoin werden. Das ist seine Virtualität. Das ist Information. Und deswegen fürchten Feiglinge Pflanzen wie Daten, weil sie unformatiert, unberechenbar sind.
I want to talk a little bit more about that sound material we were using for our project, and that was, as I mentioned before, a digital rainforest. And the interesting thing here is if you look to rainforest environment, how it is organized, you have the feeling maybe it's just a chaotic, full spectrum of noises, you know. But if you look closely, you realize that it's not just a random thing, but this is organized in a way, like in high frequencies, low frequencies, middle range frequencies. And this is because all these creatures and animals that are have to communicate, and they use certain frequency channels in time and space to communicate their message. That's kind of interesting because also we think that like our phones is also an environment, and it's a quite dense environment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on
that's what
a
seems,
simple phone, you know. It's like
that's what seems interesting to me about the sound stuff and the website we're trying to make in general, is that you have all these different layers of things interacting though.
Maybe a signal sound like that. That could be could be a nice contribution to our thing, you know.
So.
You just the thing pops up, you know,
Yeah.
and then I use that for creating
Right.
this.
That's the whole point.
Sonic environment.
This whole kind of digital stuff that we're surrounded by is not just. It is an environment. We live in a digital environment that's constantly going. Boop, 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 bing, bing, bing,
Right.
boom,
It is
like a forest, like a rainforest.
Yeah, and it has its own organization. I remember when we were sitting in a breakfast room in Munich back there, and we were talking about this project. I immediately and we were talking about data and plants and this kind of things. I had the idea, well, it would be great to create some kind of environment like a rainforest or something, you know. Mm-hmm. But then, second thought, don't use just field recordings of a rainforest, but create its own rainforest out of just electronic sounds that refers to the electronic data, you know, like the digital data in a phone, you know, it's just electronic, made up by electronic sounds.
In our theater pieces, we always wanted to kind of mix all the different kinds of media layers together. We would have pictures and interviews and music and performances, and we like to kind of collage them all and let one follow another, and we found that we could actually try and make this happen inside a website. And we hit upon this one metaphor that you always have on a website about scrolling. You're always scrolling here, and of course scrolling is very close to strolling. You stroll through a garden, you scroll through a website, and we thought, okay, this is our idea of how the website would work. It would be a trip through many layers of images and sounds and pictures. And so we also wanted to keep our original idea of the installation, that the audience would donate a picture, And they would scroll through the website, they go to a QR code that helps them upload a picture, and then as they move, images slide in and out, and then they see their own image. And we developed a bunch of algorithms that would process each image pixel by pixel. It would sort of allow the image to distort, to grow, to morph, to change, to become alive, as if all the pixels in each picture wanted to break free and become something else or go somewhere else. And that was sort of our idea of how to turn a website, which is normally a kind of passive thing where you look at it and get information. We wanted to, as much as possible, make our website like walking through a garden or walking through an installation where you're constantly looking left or right or seeing this or that or hearing something or a bird passes by. That was our idea of a scrolling / strolling website. The Garden of Tangled Data.
저는 오늘 진행과 통역을 맡은 그 가상정거장의 총괄 프로듀서 김신우라고 합니다. 제가 먼저 이 더블럭키 프로덕션에 대해서 간단히 좀 소개를 드리고 시작을 하도록 하겠습니다. 2004년에 더블럭키 프로덕션이라는 것이 시작이 되었고 크리스 콘덱, 크리스티안 퀼, 한네스 슈트로블로 이렇게 3명이서 구성되어 있는 콜렉티브고요. 조금 이름 익숙하신 분도 있으실 것 같아요. 저희가 2010년에 페스티벌 봄이라는 곳에서 이제 서울에서 그 관객분들의 티켓료를 이용해서 주식 투자를 실시간으로 하는 죽은 고양이 반등이라는 작품으로 이제 소개된 바 있습니다. 지금 현재는 이제 사회나 경제적인 삶뿐만 아니라 저희 개인적인 어떤 일상을 지배하고 규정하는 그런 보이지 않는 디지털 인프라스트럭처를 드러내는 그런 작업을 하고 있고요. 또 무엇보다 최근에는 유기적인 네트워크 그리고 서로 다른 종 간의 어떤 커뮤니케이션 방식을 연구하고 있는 그런 작업을 하고 있다고 합니다. Hello. So we've briefly introduced you. You can say hi to the audience. Do you see them?
Yes, we see everybody. They're in the dark.
네, 안녕하세요. 손 한 번만 흔들어 주시겠어요? Hello. Great.
Hi.
So we saw your video. Thank you for the video. And before we move on to the question of the audience, we would like to just throw maybe 1 or 2 questions that came up from the team, if that's okay for you.
Sure.
네, 일단 저희가 관객분들에게 마이크를 넘기기에 앞서서 저희 팀에서 이 작업을 얘기를 들으면서 좀 궁금했던 점들을 뭐 1개 정도 질문을 먼저 해보고 시작을 하도록 하겠습니다. 저희는 사실 이 작업에서 굉장히 흥미롭다고 생각을 했던 것이 분명히 그 안에는 어떤 데이터의 유출이나 아니면은 수익 이윤을 위해서 저희의 개인정보나 이런 것들을 착취하고 활용하는 그런 것에 대한 굉장히 비판적인 시각도 담겨 있지만 그것을 그냥 단순히 비판하는 것에서 그치는 것이 아니라 그런 데이터 자체도 어떤 하나의 자연물로 간주하고 어떤 그것과의 인간과의 관계 혹은 우리 세계에서 그런 한 자연물과 어떤 식으로 관계 맺기를 하고 공생할 수 있는가 이런 통합적인 세계를 그린다는 것이 저희는 좀 흥미롭다고 생각을 했어요. 근데 이제 그게 은유로서는 굉장히 흥미롭기도 하고 와닿기도 하는데 그것에 비해서 이제 저희가 궁금했던 것은 이게 시각적으로 혹은 어떤 식으로 표현이 구체화되는가 그래서 그것이 어떻게 작품화될 수 있고 저희한테 어떤 조금 더 구체적인 아이디어로 전달이 될 수 있는가라는 부분이 오늘 발표에서는 조금 궁금했던 점인데 이 부분을 한번 질문을 해보도록 하겠습니다. So we thought it was particularly interesting in your work that it's not a very simple criticism against data exploitation or using personal private data for exploitation, but that you consider them or the data or technology itself as an organism by itself, an ecology of itself, or somehow an organic entity. And we thought that was very interesting in your works. However, through your 30-minute video, we became very curious about how that idea or that metaphor will be concretized or brought into shape. I guess you wouldn't choose a very simple representational way of describing it. So we thought how you envision the outcome or the presentation of it.
Well, I mean, we sort of tried different things, but I talk most about what we did to images that we hopefully will receive images from the user of the websites, and then we start to process them. And what you could maybe do there is think about each image not like a picture of something, but in a sense its own ecosystem. And it's an ecosystem made up of like, I don't know, 3 million pixels. And I started to make the algorithms so that instead of being interested in what the picture is, I asked myself, well, what does each one of these 3 million pixels want? And started to make pictures where the pixels themselves start to drift around the image as if they were alive, as if they wanted to go somewhere, as if they didn't like being in the picture.
일단 제가 관심 있었던 거는 이 웹사이트에 업로드되는 이미지가 그 이미지 안에 담겨있는 내용이 궁금하다기보다는 그 안에 어떤 한 이미지 안에 담겨있는 300만 개의 픽셀들이 어떤 식으로 그 이미지 안에서 움직이고 변형되고 이제 자라나는가 그런 것들을 실험할 수 있는 알고리즘을 만들었는데요. 그 자세히 그런 픽셀들이 돌아다니는 모습을 보다 보면 마치 그 그림에서 벗어나고 싶어 하는 듯한 그런 움직임을 보이는데 그런 것들을 좀 포착을 하려고 했습니다. 이 웹사이트에서.
I'd say when we think about data as being alive, we're not thinking data is alive as you and me or a plant or an animal, but that we're kind of all part of an ecosystem where everything influences each other.
저희가 데이터가 살아있다라고 말을 할 때 그 살아있다라는 것의 의미는 마치 관객 여러분이나 저 스스로 같이 살아있다거나 아니면 식물이나 동물처럼 살아있다라는 뜻이라기보다는 어떤 자기들만의 어떤 생태계를 이루고 있고 그 안에서 서로 상호작용을 하고 있다라는 의미에서 살아있다라고 하는 것입니다.
And this year, I'm sure it was the same in Seoul or in Korea as in Germany, with the pandemic, there was so much talk about that the world, how we know it, has come to an end, or what will we have learned from the crisis afterwards, from the pandemic. And I thought we should not just ask what have we learned, but also what's the we in this, Who are we? And really, as I said before, try to figure out all the relationships we're in. This includes viruses, plants, and data. It's all one big ecosystem.
그리고 틀림없이 한국에 계신 여러분들도 경험하셨겠지만 이 코로나라는 팬데믹 시대에서 많은 사람들이 이제 우리가 알던 세계는 끝났다 이렇게 말씀을 하시는데요. 우리가 이 팬데믹으로부터 무엇을 배웠나라는 질문보다 그 질문도 많이 하지만 사실 저는 오히려 더 중요한 것은 우리라고 했을 때 그 우리가 정말 누구인가를 질문하는 것이라고 생각을 합니다. 예를 들어서 바이러스나 식물이나 인간이나 이 세계를 구성하고 있는 요소들이 훨씬 더 그렇게 복잡한 어떤 생태계를 이루고 있는 것이 아닌가라고 생각하게 되었습니다.
Maybe just say one more thing. If you want to think about whether something is alive or not, I mean, at the moment there isn't really a real scientific definition of where the border between living and not living is. It's a bit soft. But the general things about living things is that they reproduce, they try to protect themselves, they try and use the space that they have, and they have a metabolism, they exchange stuff from inside outside. And then we saw that data does do all that. And we tried to find places where we could show that happening.
사실 아직까지도 혹은 이제 최근에 특히 대두되는 것은 의외로 살아있다, 그러니까 생명이다, 아니다, 살아있다, 살아있지 않다라는 과학적인 기준이 생각보다 그렇게 명확하지 않다는 것입니다. 우리가 보통은 살아있다라고 할 때 그 기준을 뭐 생식을 한다, 자기 스스로를 보호한다, 아니면 신진대사가 있다 이런 것들을 드는데요. 사실 그 모든 것을 데이터도 하고 있거든요. 그런 의미에서 데이터도 살아있다라고 볼 수 있지 않을까라고 생각해 보았습니다. Thank you. We will ask the audience if they have any questions. 혹시 오늘 보신 내용 관련해서 혹은 이 그동안의 작가님들에게 궁금하셨던 내용이 있으시면 질문을 자유롭게 주셔도 좋고요. 온라인에 계신 분들도 자유롭게 질문을 하시면 좋겠습니다.
네, 제가 질문 좀 드리겠습니다. 네, 굉장히 흥미로운 작업이고 앞으로 기대되는 작업인데 중요한 거는 이 무한 증식하는 데이터라는 식물, 이 식물은 무한 증식할 것 같아요. 예, 통제 불가능할 정도로. 아까 생태계라는 말씀을 하셨는데 그 생태계 안에는 지금 인간도 들어있잖아요. 약간 드라마틱한 설정 같지만 그런 무한 증식하는 데이터 식물의 정원 속에서 앞으로 인간의 위치는 어떻게 될 것이라고 생각하시는지요? 거기까지 생각하셨는지 묻고 싶습니다.
Thank you for the very interesting work, and we have a lot of expectations of what it will look like. But if you think about data as an organism, it must be an ever-growing and infinitely growing entity, like a plant that doesn't stop growing. And in that sense, if we are all together in the ecology, including humans, while this data plant grows infinitely, where do you position the human, or what will happen to the human? Have you thought about it, or is that of any of your interest?
Well, I guess there's been a long history of the human being sort of at the top of creation and getting lower and lower and lower and lower. I suppose at a certain point, it's helpful to say, okay, the human is not in charge of everything, but it's just one small element in a much bigger world. And so I guess we hope that we're just trying to find different ways to be aware of that. So the answer to your question, I think, is that the human becomes smaller and smaller and more aware of everything around them.
저희가 한때 인간이 어떤 창조의 최상위에 있다라고 생각했던 그런 믿음이 있었던 반면에 점점 더 그 인간의 위치는 거기서 내려오고 있다고 생각을 하는데요. 그래서 뭔가 모든 것을 관장하던 그런 어떤 주체에서 점점 더 이제 하나의 훨씬 더 큰 세계의 한 일부, 한 조각에 불과한 그런 위치로 내려오고 있다고 생각을 하고, 이제 저희 작업에서는 그것을 조금 더 저희가 깨달을 수 있게 도와주는 인간이 점점 더 작아지고, 앞으로의 미래에는 인간이 점점 더 작은 위치를 점하게 될 것이고, 저희 작업은 그것을 드러내는 것이라고 생각합니다. 혹은 그것을 깨닫게 해주는 것이라고 생각합니다.
Well, maybe I can add something here. Like when you think of this from a sound level, you can also bring in this kind of theory that Bernie Krause is his name, and he found out that if you listen to an ecosystem like the rainforest, where very many sounds are happening, he found out that every creature in this environment finds his own channel where he can communicate. And I think that's also something that we learned in this project. And like what Chris said, I think this is very important. We just wanted to make the audience aware of that there are many beings around us, even if we don't are aware of them.
그리고 이것을 음향적인 차원에서도 생각해 볼 수 있을 것 같은데요. 버니 크라우스라는 사람의 이론에 따르면 생태계, 예를 들면 열대우림, 아마존이나 그런 열대우림에 가면 굉장히 여러 소리가 나는 환경이 있는데, 그 안에 이 이론에 따르면 그 안에 존재하는 모든 생명체들이 각자 자신만의 채널을 점유하고 자신만의 소통 채널을 가진다고 합니다. 그랬을 때 이제 그런 것들을 깨닫게 되면 저희가 그냥 어떤 굉장히 많은 여러 개들 중에 인간이 하나라는 것에 불과하다라는 아까 크리스가 말했던 그런 내용을 다시 한번 좀 깨닫게 되는 지점이라고 생각합니다.
And one other thing, maybe in the piece, we have divided the piece in 7 chapters, and that follow the life of a plant and the cycles. So, of course, the second last chapter is withering, and there we also say, at first sight, the analogy between data and plant stops because plants are withering and data is not. Data always stays the same. It has always an identical copy on some server farm. And then we say, but maybe this is what we have to do, make data wither, turn hard drives into compost, not let it grow incessantly, like infinitely. Make it disappear. Not all of it, but let it go through cycles too.
그리고 저희가 아까 웹사이트가 총 7개 장으로 구성되어 있다고 말씀을 드렸는데요. 그 중에서 이제 뒤에서 두 번째가 시들다라는 섹션입니다. 근데 말씀하셨던 것처럼 이제 데이터는 무한 증식하잖아요. 그래서 여기서 이 지점에서 이제 식물과 데이터의 유비가 깨지는 순간이 나옵니다. 왜냐하면 데이터는 시들지 않고 식물은 시드는 반면에 데이터는 시들지 않기 때문인데요. 그래서 저희는 이 작업에서만큼은 데이터가 시들어야 된다고 생각을 했고 그래서 이 6번째 장을 만들었습니다. 그래서 이 하드 드라이브가 점점 시들고 썩어 들어가고 그래서 이제 퇴비가 되어가는 그런 완전히 심지어는 사라지기까지 하는 그런 구조를 만들었습니다.
아까 작업 설명하실 때 특히 사운드가 공간에 관련돼서 되게 같이 작용하는 그런 것들이 되게 부분들이 크다고 하셨는데 지금 계획하시고 계신 프로젝트가 이제 외부로 상영이 될 예정이잖아요. 그러면 사람들이 온라인으로 다 보게 되는데 그 오프라인에서 사람들이 공간 속에서 사운드든 비주얼이든 그 인터랙션 하는 것들이 외부로 구현될 때 혹시 제약이나 이런 것들이 예상을 하시는지 혹은 그런 부분들을 이용을 거기에 대한 어떤 작품적인 그런 방향 같은 게 구체적으로 고려된 부분들이 있는지 이런 것들이 궁금합니다.
During the video, Hannes, you talked about how the space, the relationship between the sound and the space, and that the space influences the sound, and that they interact. But now the project is planned to be a web-only project. And in this case, so the audiences or the visitors will probably visit the website from their offline settings in their own environment. And do you have any plans or specific ideas of how the sound or the visuals will be manifested in this website, or how the audiences will interact in that sense? Would there be a limitation because it's a web-only project in visual and sound, in respect of sound and visuals?
Well, it's of course, I don't know if you can say this is a limitation. It's just a different medium, so you have to think of it in a different way and construct it in a different way. But of course, if you listen to it on headphones, what we suppose for this website project, then the sound, the space is created by the sound itself, because this is also possible. If you just hear it through, this experience, if you hear it through headphones, there's also a space in there, but this is then created only by the sound without this interconnection. So it is constructed and planned in that way. Yeah, I would say.
제약이라고, 그러니까 또 다른 환경 혹은 세팅이지 제약이라고 생각하지는 않고요. 그래서 이 웹사이트에 들어왔을 때 사운드를 헤드폰으로 만약에 듣는다고 했을 때 그 헤드폰이 만들어내는 어떤 공간감, 그 사운드 그 자체가 만들어내는 어떤 공간감이나 이런 것들을 활용할 수 있기 때문에 그것 자체를 어떤 하나의 조건으로 생각하고 작업을 하고 있습니다. Will there be like sound interaction happening in the website?
Sound interaction with the user? Yes, there will be. For example, if you, for example, click certain sounds, certain objects, then sounds will come up. So you get also this kind of interconnection. Yes.
And isn't it that there's always a mixture of a background sound and a foreground sound?
Oh yeah, there's the way it is constructed is like a background sound that you can think of the space where all the things are happening. You create a kind of sound space, and in that sound space, the other things are happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
그리고 이 웹사이트에서 사운드로 상호작용할 수 있는 요소들이 분명히 있을 것이고요. 그래서 어떤 사물들을 클릭하면 어떤 소리가 난다거나 하는 식으로 상호작용을 하는 부분이 있을 것이고, 또 전반적으로 그 배경음이 있을 텐데 거기서는 이제 마치 굉장히 많은 일들이 일어나고 있는 것 같은 그런 사운드가 배경음으로 깔리고, 이제 그 앞에 전면으로 이제 또 다른 음향들이 깔리는 그런 것을 생각하고 있습니다. There was an online question. What do you envision as the future expansion of this project? How do you envision to expand this project further from the website version, I guess? Or do you have any other issues that you are currently interested in that you want to deal with in the future? 저 죄송합니다. 여기 현장에 계신 분들한테 이 작품이 확장되어 이어질 앞으로의 작품은 어떤 것인지 혹은 더 다루고 싶은 관련 이슈가 있는지 궁금합니다라는 질문을 주셨습니다.
One thing, do you want to say?
I guess it's for now have not really been thinking about how to evolve this further or develop this further because it hasn't even opened yet. And in a way, this we had wanted to make, we said that in the video, we had wanted to make a real installation with audience in the space. We wanted to really create a space where you, your phones, your data, and plants are interacting, let's say. So this was already an evolvement of that show. And I guess now we want to wait to see how it looks. We will know that next week. And of course, if we like it, then we would like to continue working this way because it seems for us, as long as we cannot meet and cannot travel to Korea or, we cannot even be on stage in Berlin, then of course to find a theatrical way to deal online is something to explore.
아직은 웹사이트조차 오픈하지 않았기 때문에 그 다음에 어떻게 이 프로젝트가 발전될 것인지에 대해서는 아직 생각을 해보지 못했는데요. 사실 원래 이 작품이 구상되었을 때는 실제 관객과 그분들의 핸드폰, 데이터 그리고 식물들이 이제 서로 상호작용하는 그런 전시를 구상을 했었습니다. 그래서 그것에서 이미 한 단계 발전한 버전이 이 웹사이트 버전이라고 보시면 될 것 같고요. 이제 다음 주에 오픈을 웹사이트가 하게 될 텐데 하고 난 이후에 이제 마음에 들면 계속해서 이 작업을 더 발전시킬 의향은 있습니다. 그리고 저희한테 이게 흥미로운 이유는 지금 같은 시대에 이제 여행을 하거나 아니면은 실제 무대에 공연을 올리기가 어려운 상황이기 때문에 이런 온라인에서 연극적인 환경을 만들어내는 것이 굉장히 흥미롭다고 생각을 하고 계속할 의향이 있습니다.
But I would just add, I think we would like to try and make this installation that was always planned, because what we're missing now from the website is we don't have this experience of a lot of people in the same space with lots of screens going around, a 360 environment where people are more obviously on the same level as their data and things are happening and passing in and around the audience with a community that's made by the audience.
그리고 저희가 당초에 계획했던 설치 작업도 실제로 구현이 될 수 있으면 정말 좋겠습니다. 스크린 이제 모니터도 굉장히 여러 개가 있고 360도로 돌아다니면서 볼 수 있는 그런 환경을 만들었으면 좋겠고요. 그래서 사람과 데이터가 정말 동등한 레벨에서 이렇게 같이 서로 상호작용할 수 있는 그런 환경을 생각을 했고 네, 그렇습니다. 네. 그리고 그 안에서 어떤 하나의 공동체가 되어서 관객들이 이동할 수 있는 그런 지점을 상상을 했습니다.
And can I say something, or was that a question?
No,
Okay.
no, you can say something.
Because I think also, to answer the last question, the Garden of Tangled Data is a project we started to think about like 1.5 years ago. It was supposed to come out a year ago, and it was really just about plants, data and plants. And now we're coming back to something we said earlier. I think during this year of the pandemic, we somehow broadened the awareness of all other things that are alive and in the same system, like viruses, bacteria, microbes. We got really interested in all kinds of levels of how things are entangled.
그리고 사실 이 헝클어진 데이터의 정원 프로젝트는 1년 반 전에 구상이 되었고 1년 전에 원래는 시연이 될 예정이었습니다. 그래서 그때 당시만 해도 이제 팬데믹이 일어나기 전이었기 때문에 식물과 데이터에 관련된 혹은 집중된 그런 프로젝트였던 것에 비해서 이제 지난 1년을 거쳐오면서 훨씬 더 다양한 층위에서 우리가 굉장히 많은 존재들 혹은 개체들이 살고 있다라는 어떤 인식이 중요하다고 생각이 되었고 그 안에는 뭐 바이러스랄지 박테리아랄지 아니면 미생물 뭐 이런 것들까지도 우리가 좀 생각을 해볼 수 있는 그런 계기가 되어서 그런 것들에 좀 관심이 있습니다.
And while thinking about it, we started. I mean, we've been meeting during the year regularly, even though we couldn't perform. And for us, we thought the current situation has a lot to do with like two terms. And one is Auflösung, which is like dissolution, and resonance. And maybe some of you have already seen the video that we contributed to the exhibition in Seoul in the virtual station. For us, these two terms became very important. Somehow we have to dissolve also many concepts we have of ourselves, of us as humans, and start to get in resonance with the rest of the world. And that's actually a new piece we're working on. We would like to do that once again in a space, but that has to do with letting go and getting in resonance.
그리고 요즘 이 시대에 저희가 두 가지 어떤 용어 혹은 개념에 대해서 굉장히 관심을 갖게 되었습니다. 하나는 소멸 혹은 용해라는 개념이고 또 다른 하나는 공명 또는 뭐 반향 이런 개념인데요. 혹시 여기 오늘 이 가상정거장 전시에서 이미 보셨을 수도 있겠지만 이제 소멸이라는 작품은 영상 작품으로 저희가 이미 만들었고 그래서 어떤 식으로든 인간 혹은 어떤 굉장히 주체 중심적인 사고를 소멸시키고 녹여내고 그리고 다른 어떤 개체들과 반향하고 공명할 수 있는 방법을 우리가 찾아야 되는 것이 아닐까라는 고민을 요즘 하고 있고 그래서 그런 작품을 또 별개로 준비를 하고 있습니다. 인간, 식물, 데이터 그리고 다른 많은 고유의 채널들이 동등하게 상호 대화할 수 있는 것으로 보신다고 하셨는데 만약에 그렇다면 그것이 어떻게 가능할 거라고 상상하시는지에 대한 내용을 좀 더 이야기해 주실 수 있을까요? 라는 질문을 주셨습니다. Sorry, I couldn't read the handwriting, so I have to. So the question is, you mentioned that many entities, including humans, plants, and data, have their own channels and that they communicate or they can communicate with each other. If they could communicate with each other, like between the entities, how do you imagine that could be possible? Do you think, what kind of form would that take place as an imagination?
Well, of course, we don't know exactly, but I think that's why we ended up in the plant world, because it has the best models of multi-channel communication with, as you probably know, like mushroom mycelium, the way they exchange information and chemicals with tree roots, and they create huge networks that spread for miles. It seems to be the best model of how that communication might happen, but I don't really know yet.
저희가 이제 그런 지점들을 계속 고민을 하다가 결국에 도착하게 된 것이 이 식물의 세계인데요. 왜냐하면 식물의 세계가 저희가 생각했을 때 그런 멀티 채널 소통, 커뮤니케이션의 가장 좋은 모델이라고 생각했기 때문입니다. 예를 들면 뭐 버섯이나 곰팡이 같은 것들이 서로 정보를 교환하거나 아니면 전기적인 신호를 보내거나 막 수만 마일에 걸쳐 있는 네트워크로 서로 상호작용하거나 하는 그런 커뮤니케이션 방식이 흥미롭다고 생각을 했는데 그런 것이 모델이 되었지만 그게 실제로는 어떻게 저희 안에 그런 상호 소통 방식으로 구현될 수 있을까에 대해서는 아직 잘 모르겠습니다. 하나 더 온라인 질문이 있는데요. 데이터의 존재와 유통 흐름은 네트워크라는 물질적 기반, 예를 들면 뭐 서버나 케이블을 전제로 합니다. 당신들의 작업들, 웹페이지도 데이터로 구성이 되지만 여전히 물질 기반인 네트워크에 의존하는데 이에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시나요? 라는 질문을 주셨습니다. So, the data, the existence of data still takes very material basis, like servers and cables, like actual material things as their basis. Like the network itself is based on a very material basis, like fundament. And so your works, for instance, it consists of web pages and data, but it still relies on a material basis called the network. What do you think about that relationship between the materiality and the immateriality of what you are dealing with?
Well,
Well, there is a big gap, obviously, between what an ideal world would look like and how we're dealing with it. I mean, we know that the whole, like what we call the cloud, is a big server somewhere. There is no, it's all very material. And as a matter of fact, streaming, also what we're doing right now, uses up a lot of energy, and that's gonna not help make the climate better. In fact, you know, we're kind of working against what we're just saying, like a balanced communication with everybody. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, what you say, take it as a criticism, but I think it's right. We have to find other ways also.
사실 저희가 이제 추구하는 어떤 이상과 현실에서 좀 다른 지점이라고 생각을 하는데요. 예를 들면 저희가 클라우드 서비스라고 뭐 클라우드 서버 이런 얘기를 많이 하지만 그것들은 실제로 어딘가에 어느 공간에 물리적인 자리를 차지하고 있고 당장 오늘만 해도 저희가 뭐 인간과 다른 개체들의 평등한 관계 이런 것들을 이야기하지만 저희가 이 스트리밍을 위해서 소모하는 굉장히 많은 에너지는 결코 이 지구 행성에 그렇게 도움이 되지 않을 것 같아요. 그래서 어떻게 보면 지금 말하고 있는 것에 반하는 그런 행위들을 하고 있는데요. 그래서 그런 것들에 대해서 좀 비판적인 시각 혹은 좀 성찰적인 시각을 가지고 작업을 하려고 합니다.
And maybe I would just add, though, that it's still important to become aware of all the different layers, and that's what I think the project helps to do. And one way is if you think of just the picture in general, well, the picture is just virtual. It's just a string of numbers, but dependent on the program that's displaying it or the hardware that's displaying it, that's what makes you see it. But the picture in itself, the digital picture, is not something you can see. It's only because of the hardware. But now, because of that, because of the way we're thinking, I can realize, there's data and there's hardware and there's electricity, and electricity is photons, and photons are like microbes, and microbes need humans, and humans eat the more you pick one little spot, the more you can see all the different layers and hopefully find good ways for them all to be, I guess.
그리고 이 프로젝트의 장점이라고 한다면 그 수많은 레이어들을 볼 수 있게 해준다는 것인 것 같아요. 그래서 아까도 말씀드렸듯이 이 업로드될 이미지 그 자체는 그 어떤 물질성도 가지고 있지 않습니다. 정말 순수하게 0과 1로 구성되어 있는 가상적인 것이고 그것은 우리가 볼 수 있는 것이 아닌데요. 근데 그게 어떤 일련의 물리적이고 물질적인 프로그램을 통하고 또 그것을 다시 화면으로 보내주는 어떤 하드웨어가 있기 때문에 우리가 그것을 보게 되는데요. 이 웹사이트를 통해서 그런 식으로 어떤 우리가 이미지를 봤을 때 그것을 구성하고 있는 수많은 레이어들을 보기 위해서는 어떤 한 가지 굉장히 작은 미시적인 지점을 포착을 하고 그 안에서 마치 우리가 뭐 인간이 그냥 이렇게 크게 존재하는 것 같지만 그 안에서 뭐 미생물도 있고 그 안에 박테리아도 있고 많은 세균이 같이 안에 인간 안에 존재하는 것을 봐야 되는 것처럼 그런 식으로 그런 지점 하나를 포착해서 여러 레이어들을 볼 수 있게 하는 그런 작업을 하려고 합니다. 마지막으로 이제 팀에서 좀 지금 전시장에서도 상영되고 있는 소멸이라는 작품하고 좀 같이 생각을 해봤는데 아까 토크에서도 굉장히 여러 번 나온 얘기지만 어떤 인간 중심적인 세계관 혹은 주체 중심적인 사고방식 그런 것들의 소멸에 관해서 이야기하고 있는 작품이에요. 그런데 이런 전체적인 우리가 자각 속에서 도대체 그러면 우리가 기술의 발전 혹은 이 굉장히 맹목적으로 우리가 달려가고 있는 이 기술이라는 문제에 대해서 어떻게 볼 수 있는가 혹은 이 작가님들은 어떻게 생각을 하고 계신지 조금은 넓은 질문이지만 해보려고 했습니다. Because also we are presenting your other work, Auflösung, together with this and during today's talk, we mentioned many times about how to make things flatter or how to overcome this anthropocentric way of thinking. But in all of this, what does technology or our obsession for technological advancement mean for you? I mean, in a way, the pandemic kind of also propels this optimism that technology will also solve everything. So in relation to your view or your attempts, why are you so keen to work with technology in this context? It's a very broad question, but your attitude or your perspectives.
Because it's more fun than working with stones.
돌보다 기술로 작업하는 것이 더 재밌기 때문입니다.
Well, I think to create art, the technology like computers and whatever sound machines, etc., are really a great tool. You know, I mean, it's somehow in former times, if you want to make or present your music, it was a really also this video. You needed a lot of equipment. This was very expensive, and you were totally dependent on other companies or like record labels or something like this that will finance this. And now you're free. You can do it. You know, you have all these tools available. So from this side, it's really great to have that. And no question.
왜냐하면 그런 기술이나 예를 들면 뭐 사운드 관련된 장치 이런 것들이 훌륭한 도구가 될 수 있기 때문이라고 생각을 합니다. 예를 들면 과거에 우리가 음악을 만들고 이제 유통하려면 되게 비싼 돈을 들여서 어떤 레이블 회사랑 같이 일을 한다거나 아니면 레코드를 발매를 한다거나 하는 그런 지난한 과정을 겪었어야 하는데 이제 오늘날에는 더 이상 이제 돈이 들지 않고 훨씬 더 자유롭게 그런 것들을 도구들을 활용해서 조금 더 많은 것들을 만들어낼 수 있기 때문에 훌륭한 도구가 될 수 있다고 생각합니다.
Also, I think in the first place, we're very interested in how do we build communities or how does society work? How do we organize ourselves? And right now, obviously, this world is organized through digital infrastructures. I mean, a lot depends on infrastructures that also predict or structure the way we behave. And we like to reflect this in our work and think about it think about it critically and also maybe introduce metaphors so we can think about it differently.
그리고 저희는 기본적으로 우리가 어떤 공동체를 만들어가는 방식, 우리의 사회가 형성되고 구성되어 있는 방식, 조직화되어 있는 방식 이런 것들에 관심이 많은데요. 그러다 보니까 아무래도 지금 우리가 오늘날 살고 있는 이 사회는 이 디지털 인프라로 많이 규정이 되어 있고 구성이 되어 있습니다. 그래서 그것들을 반영할 수밖에 없고 그것에 대해서 비평적으로 생각을 할 수 있고 또 그것에 대해서 이제 다른 방식으로 생각을 해볼 수 있다라고 생각을 해서 그렇게 기술에 대한 접근을 하고 있습니다.
I could just add one short thing to that. We've always used technology, but always, I think Christiana just said it, we've always used technology, but always with an idea of using that technology to also critique the technology or critique how we use it. And so we're always in a kind of feedback loop with the technology.
그리고 마지막으로 덧붙이자면 저희가 그동안의 작업에서 계속해서 기술을 이용을 해왔는데요. 그 기술을 이용할 때 동시에 그 저희가 다루는 기술을 이제 비평하기도 합니다. 그런 의미에서 그 기술을 이용하는 동시에 비평하는 일종의 그런 피드백 루프 같은 것들이 생겨난다고 생각합니다. 그러면 오늘은 여기까지 토크를 마무리하도록 하고요. 이 작가님들께 시간 내주셔서 감사하다는 박수 한 번만 부탁드리겠습니다. Thank you so much for taking your time today. Hope
Thank you very
to see you in Korea. 다시 한국에서 직접 뵐 수 있는 날이 오기를 바랍니다. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.